Good morning, good afternoon to everyone out there. Welcome to episode 61 of the Leading IT podcast. Today, we're going to talk about AI, what works, what doesn't work. We're going to cut through the hype today. And our podcast for new listeners is for Australian IT leaders who are looking to stay up to date with the latest IT news and trends in AI, cybersecurity, cloud and infrastructure, strategy, and leadership. Your hosts are Tom Leyden, the CIO at Longview, and me, Josh Rubens, CEO at consulting firm Empyrean IT. And we're going to tackle the fast-changing IT landscape from both sides of the client-vendor paradigm with pragmatic, actionable advice. And today we're excited to be joined by Dave Phung. He's the Chief Disruptor at GPT Strategic. And we're going to discuss the current state of play for AI in the Australian market and what's working and what's not. But first, as always, we'll get into a bit of news. G'day, Tom.
G'day, Josh. Are you excited about Hawthorn this Friday?
I am. It's good to, didn't expect it. And, anything's a bonus from here.
Mate, I reckon they'll give the doggies a chance. They'll give them a run for their money, I reckon.
Hope so.
I've got some news. I do have a bit of news. First one, Windows 10 end of life in October 2025. Not news, of course, but they are saying that now saying to report there are a lot of compatibility issues with upgrading to Windows 11. So there's some new changes around the patch rollouts and the way they're upgrading that sort of coming up with errors. So if you're thinking about Windows 11 upgrades, there's a lot of advice around what you need to do, but you should really start checking on your hardware you actually got out there. Now, the cynics would say that this could be a ploy to buy more hardware, but I think what Microsoft's point is that they need to be a bit more in control of the hardware you've got so they can secure it better, is the official line, Josh. Do you believe that?
I have a couple of things. One is if you're only thinking about it now, you're a bit late. 6 weeks before the end of support of Windows 10, you should probably have been planning it. I'm not having a go at you. I'm just saying in general, customers should have been planning it for a while. And yes, they want people to buy the Copilot Plus PCs.
Yes.
I would suggest, yes.
Seems a bit dodgy anyway, so it's just something that you need to be aware of, right?
Yeah, you got to follow the process and do all the app compatibility testing and not assume that it's just going to be a very easy transition. So it really depends on what you're running, I think.
Yep. Then what's your news?
So, the VMware annual event was last week. So
I missed it.
I know. Well, I think a lot of people did. Normally, we do a whole show on it, but because since the Broadcom acquisition, VMware's popularity has decreased. I wonder if there was a much smaller turnout than usual last week. But there are a few things, so I'm gonna hit the sort of top 5 or 6 things briefly. One that I saw that was quite interesting in the keynote was from a Barclays CIO survey. They reckon that 83% of enterprises are planning to move workloads back to private cloud from public cloud. Does that sound like
85%?
83%.
So back out of public to private.
Yeah.
And primarily because cost or?
Yes. Cost. It does seem like a very self-serving statistic. I don't know if that sounds like a very high number. I mean, definitely people are certainly starting to look at their workloads a bit more closely and, move things back that are just costing a lot of money and probably don't suit the public cloud. Like storage particularly is very expensive. But I don't know, that feels a little high and self-serving. And I was interested to see that Michael Dell on X tagged it as well, which not surprised very much by that. Couple of things. So they actually had IDs because everyone's been complaining about their pricing. They had IDC did a report saying that compared to public cloud, that VMware Cloud Foundation reduces infrastructure costs by 34%, increased 50% efficiency, and 42% lower overall cost of operations.
Do you believe that? Do you believe that
I
as
don't
well?
know. Again, it's I'm getting a little cynical in my old age, but I feel they're trying to justify the fact that they've tripled the price, and customers are really annoyed, and they're trying to I don't know. And can you Gartner and IDC pay for play? I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
But the problem is their perception. So they charged a certain amount, and now they charge much more. It
yeah,
doesn't matter what the underlying cost savings, perceived savings are. The reality is you're comparing it against your last bill, right?
yeah,
That's
yeah. Probably, yeah. You can't just triple things and tell customers to suck it up and expect people to stick around. So there were a few interesting things. I'll cover them. I'll cover them quickly because I want to get into our chat today. So they released. They announced vCloud Foundation version 9. So they've consolidated about a dozen management consoles into one. So instead of having to do things from a different console, they've got an improved VCF import tool, so you can easily import data from different tools and older versions. Advanced memory tiering with NVMe, so virtualized memory tiering, which will work really nicely for machine learning and AI applications. Multi-tenancy, so they used to have a solution called vCloud Director, which was for multi-tenancy, so now enterprises will be able to run that themselves in their own environment. And the main thing, which will not surprise you, is they've announced the VMware Private AI Foundation with NVIDIA. So everyone's wanting to get in bed with NVIDIA. So now things like a model store, so or enterprises will be able to present a store of curated LLMs that users can go in and self-service. You can get NVIDIA AI enterprise software with it. There'll be some NVIDIA NIM microservices that people can launch. So customers who want to run AI on-prem, they're wanting to provide a really simple stack for users to go and do that.
yeah, right.
And maybe worth a chat with when we bring Dave in to talk about, because a lot of the the word around is that the cloud is good for AI, when you're doing your proof of concepts, when you're testing it, but once you know what you're doing, bring it on prem, because you can buy the NVIDIA infrastructure, and then you're not continuing to pay for that, the high amount each time. So that I'm interested to hear Dave's view on that. So that's pretty big. So there's a and they had a couple of very big customers. The US Senate and the Federal Credit Union got up on stage and talked about their experience with this private AI on VCF. So that's some really big customers there. And the only other one was they've improved the vSAN data protection snapshots, because that was always a bit of an issue with vSAN. So now you can have immutable snapshots to roll back to, really good for ransomware recovery. And then the final bit was, which is also related to today's chat, is they've enhanced their edge compute stack. So the concept that with now AI, with IoT devices and streaming data, that the edge is going to be, a really important place to do AI and data processing. So, that was the main thing. So not a heap. I mean, normally we do an hour on the VMware conference, but that was it. So I'm sure there was more, but I certainly couldn't find a lot more. So I don't know about you, but a little disappointed with that. Normally there's a lot more there.
It's the AI stuff, the on-prem AI stuff is interesting. That'd be worth maybe looking about how you actually make all that come together in the future. But it is interesting, right? And obviously they're setting themselves up for that on-prem return to prem play that may or may not actually exist. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Did you have any other news, Tom?
I do have a quick news item about AI actually in the lead up to Dave, and this is from Samsung, who have put AI into your fridge, and basically they can tell what's in your fridge and then what you can cook with what's in your fridge. I need that at the moment. I have no idea what's in my fridge. I certainly have no idea how to cook what's in my fridge. So I thought there's a good use case for you, Josh. That'd be
Yes, that's an enterprise use case. Let's do a proof of concept immediately.
I think it's a marvelous idea from the point of view of food waste, right?
There you go.
I've just got half a celery stick left. What am I going to do with this?
Yeah. Well, how many times do I go to the supermarket and buy stuff that I already had? It's really silly.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So get the cottage cheese out, and you're good to go with the. So quickly, Dave, let me do an intro, and then we're keen to get into it. So Dave is a specialist in transforming enterprises through disruptive technologies and human-centered design. With a career over 2 decades, he's delivered cutting-edge digital innovations for the like of Fidelity Investments, General Electric, the Australian Open, Penfolds, US Golf Association, Sony PlayStation, and many others. In 2022, Dave and his team received the Cannes Lion Award for innovative use of technology in sport, one of the highest honours in the creative industry. Currently, he's the Chief Disruptor at GPT Strategic. Dave leads the implementation of Gen AI strategies for a diverse array of clients. Welcome to the Leading IT podcast, Dave.
Thanks for having me, Josh. Thanks for having me, Tom. It's great to be part of these conversations.
It's a pleasure. So, when we get started, so what are your thoughts of on-prem, private cloud, VMware, NVIDIA?
I guess it feels like the orthodontist telling you need braces, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
I think the real answer is it depends on your use case, your industry, your sector, the specific data you're handling. There's all sorts of different requirements in different jurisdictions on how data is stored, transited, received, archived, et cetera, all the different disaster recovery, business continuity planning requirements from all the different possible industries. So I think really the answer is it depends. I haven't heard of a great many projects kicking off to migrate cloud workloads onto on-prem. But hey, let's see what happens.
Oh, come on, 83%, Dave. Come on.
Let's see. But I did read a contradictory statistic around laptops. In that it could have been on one of your podcasts where a CIO was saying that laptop refresh cycles are essentially getting longer and longer because all the workload's no longer on the machine. I found that in my personal experience. I've got an not that old, 3-year-old M1 MacBook. It doesn't skip a beat, and I have no reason for it. Everything's through a browser. Everything's done at somewhere else, basically, to put it in layman's terms. So I'm not sure I need another laptop unless I wanted a fancier screen with higher nits and more pixels. There's no real sort of requirement for me anyway.
So what do you think of the whole sort of the Microsoft's push around these Copilot plus PCs with running, small language models on your device with those sorts of local use cases? Have you got any thoughts on that?
I think there's an inevitability to that because right now it's really about Microsoft. I mean, the Microsoft narrative is very, very well played out, right? From there all the way back in, it feels like 100 years ago, but about 8 months ago, thereabouts, they reversed the truck and backed out a heap of cash into the OpenAI vault and said, "Hey, let's do this." And you can see that it's triggered this wave, and you guys, I'm sure, are seeing it as well. A wave of generative AI adoption through Copilot, which is it's easy, right? It's there. You may as well turn it on. Your data's already behind SharePoint. It's on your Azure instance. So it's the story writes itself. And I think that what's going to happen from there on, if we sort of project out, you're going to see this, deeper specialization, not only at the business, but the function level, and then on the individual level, right? And that's all going to be Copilot enabled and OpenAI or LLM powered, right? I think that's the narrative because the form factor is still one that remains unsolved, right? The form factor hasn't changed. It's still screens and keyboards and mice, right? But is that the case? And there's been a few false starts. I'm sure you guys have seen the things like the likes of Rabbit R1 and other sort of hardware plays to really deeply embed AI into our lives, or generative AI into our lives. But it was a bit of a false start, let's be frank. But that'll change. That'll change. I suspect very very quickly. And it's I'd say in Australia right now, the general attitude is that of cautious optimism.
Yeah.
More and more projects are now, the general theme is, you know, improve productivity through off-the-shelf tools, right? At a very, very high level, it's things like, hey, give everyone ChatGPT Pro licenses or turn on Copilot for a certain number of people and let's see what happens. And Josh and I were just saying before we before we hit the record button that every couple of days now you see insert percentage project failed, insert percentage pilots failed to operationalize, et cetera, et cetera. I'm genuinely glad those headlines are starting to make their way into the business media, so to speak. It's because over the past 18 months, the story's been completely overhyped, completely over sensationalized. It turns out that we all still need to work and trawl through emails and answer things, and it's ridiculous how much we've inflated expectations in the short term and completely forgotten about really basic business fundamentals. What's the problem you're trying to solve, guys? What's the opportunity we're trying to address, guys? It's we get someone told me once that we're just humans, it's just monkeys looking at shiny lights. We're hopeless, right? We're absolutely hopeless. We're so easy, and it's so easy for us to just get dazzled by the shiny lights of Gen AI.
On that point, Dave, there's really about this as well. There's the Gartner hype curve, right? We're all familiar with the Gartner hype curve. It feels like we're very much on the downward slope vein. It's all been overhyped, overpromised, and then now we're actually dealing with it. We're realizing that it's not the answer for all things. It's the answer for some things, though. Well, don't forget that it's still the answer for some of those things. So, do you think we're sort of coming down to the bottom of that slope, or do you still think there's a fair way to go around, expectation, realization or normalization?
I'd like to think we're closer to the bottom, and I say that because in the various webinars and panels and what have you, the conversation tone and the question tone seems to be quite different, right? 3 months ago, the general question was around, maybe 6 months ago, the general question was, is this stuff sentient? Tell me about hallucinations. Now, the general questions are around, how do I ensure I can safely and quickly adopt and bring this technology and to yield the productivity benefits safely? And what are the risks and how do we manage them? So it's really about the practical execution. So that's why I think that we're closer to the bottom of that. Yeah, and people are just practical now, and in the sense that it's not going to solve everything.
Yeah,
we still need the people to do the work, and it's I think pragmatism finally has reared its head and said, hey, we're still here. Let's have a talk about what problems you're trying to solve type line of questioning. So it's a good thing, and we're fortunate in technology because the likes of OpenAI and Microsoft have marketed Gen AI to every person on the face of the planet, it seems. And with that, I guess, lens, the average information worker, let's call it, can now look at their role and their tasks and business function and industry and figure out how they might bring it into the workforce and where it might actually generate some benefit. So closer to the bottom, to answer your question.
So Dave, can I ask, so what do you think, what is from your anecdotal view, the state of AI, in Australia? I'm talking from a business/enterprise perspective.
Yeah, look, I think what's been happening over the past 6 to 12 months is CIOs, CTOs, CDOs have gone about the pay and play model, right? Let's get users familiar with the technology. Let's get the organization comfortable with what it does, what it's good at, what it's not, etc. And now with that, let's call it a foundational layer of knowledge. With that foundational layer of knowledge, organizations are now starting to look at more specific use cases, right? So it would be inaccurate to broadly sort of categorize all businesses into that, but there are many businesses now that I speak to running a series of different pilots there are many organizations a bit earlier, so just off-the-shelf productivity tools. And my belief is that general purpose productivity tools will not solve business-specific problems, but you need to go through that first before you can look at your business with the right tint of lens on. Right? And so we're starting to see a lot of people with the right tint of lens on and really figure out the pilots, figure out what and where to integrate generative AI to yield the most benefit. I think that there's a very thin wall between success and failure. I think the two things that really stand out right now is that one, chief technology officers and technology leaders of various labels have a really good opportunity to take a leadership position in the AI and Gen AI conversation, and that's because most people are still foraging around to figure out how to piece it together, and IT leaders have the opportunity to say, hey, we are here to enable the business with the technology. We don't know the use case because we don't know the pain. We don't feel the pain. We're not the owners of the pain and perhaps the opportunity more broadly, but we have the wherewithal to be able to bring the right tools, the techniques, the frameworks, suppliers in some cases to bear to solve your business problem, right? So I think it's a wonderful opportunity for IT leaders to step up to the plate, so to speak, and take that role. Yeah. And I think the second thing is, and it doesn't really matter where it comes from, but I think the second thing is to really top down infuse that mindset of innovation, right? Where it be techniques of human-centered design, or emergent thinking concepts where there's an organizational okayness, for want of a better word, in experimenting, in trying new things, in failing and calling it a failure and moving on. Right? I think that needs to be part of the conversation, because for a technology that's come from a garage project to global regulation in 18 months, no one really knows where it's going to go in another 18, right? So making your organization's leaders okay with experimenting and trying and adopting that mindset of, failing forward, failing fast, that sort of mindset is really powerful in an emerging technology conversation, especially Gen AI, where every second day there's a new earth-shattering headline about who's invested what into where, and what NVIDIA stock's worth, and what language models at what level of PhD level proficiency. So there's just a lot of noise, and being in the eye of the storm, IT leaders should step up to the plate and say, hey, we can help you as a business with a framework to integrate to securely, safely integrate generative AI into your business functions.
So you mentioned safety a fair bit there. I think there's a lot to unpack around safety. Do you want to start off with a few points around what you actually mean by safety in AI?
Probably needs another 7 hours, doesn't it? I think there was an article I read a little while ago now, but the most dangerous thing about generative AI is still the users. It's malicious intent, it's bad actors, right? They exist in every system, in every corner of the globe, whether we like it or not. So I think that a general level of education about what these tools are, and for example, why you shouldn't upload commercially confidential information into publicly available language models, just really fundamental stuff like that. So I think layers, right? The first layer is the people. Get your people proficient with the tools, what it is, what it does, etc. I think that's absolutely crucial for any IT leader right now in Australia. The second is at an organizational level. What's the sort of technology boundaries? What are the tech stack? That you want to put into place to sort of cordon off, for want of a better label, the boundaries so that your users are safe. So once you have those two in place, I think you're most of the way there, right? And once people understand what they can or should and shouldn't do in publicly available tools, what they can and can't do within the tools that they've been provided, you're most of the way there. Then obviously there's the security controls that you can put into place, all the various standards and compliance that I'm not an expert in, but I know they exist, that need to be overlay onto all of that. I think everyone wants the benefit, but no one wants the risk. So I think it's on IT leaders to really hold the business's hand and tell them, hey, here are the risks.
Yeah,
You can Google it now, right? There's hundreds of them that are known.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tom.
No, I was going to say, from a risk point of view, there's a data loss risk that IT leaders need to be 100% across, and then there's a quality issue, right, where people overtrust AI or end up doing something absolutely stupid or detrimental to the business by putting too much or asking you, depending on too much of its code or whatever the AI says, assuming it's some sort of gospel. Have you come across that, Dave? How do you mitigate against that sort of risk?
Yeah, that's a good one. I liken it to any of your co-workers, right? If you ask them a question, they're going to try to be helpful, right? They're going to try to give you something that's going to point you in the right direction. Language models are exactly the same, right? Especially the off-the-shelf, consumer tools, let's call them, like ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude or what have you. They're no different, right? And that's where I think a threshold level of awareness and understanding, and even if it's self-directed education as to what these tools are, how they're created, language models, how they're created, what they're essentially designed to do. Once that understanding's in place, then users should be able to figure out how to engage. Yeah, but it's easier said than done. It's much easier said than done, right? The consumer tools especially are made to be as addictive is not the right word, but yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're made so that people go back easily. They're made so that your confidence in them grows with use. They're not made for accuracy. They're not made for comprehensiveness. They're made for user acquisition. They're made for referrals. I sometimes liken it to it's the biggest social experiment the world has ever seen, right? So
Dave, so there's a lot of fear out there, I think, around from at the C level, and I think maybe one of the biggest fears is FOMO, and then which is the CEO coming to to the CIO or the CTO and saying, "What are we doing? Let's we're going to be out of business in 5 years if we're not doing AI, right? So how do we? What's up? What are we doing? So how do you balance caution and doing things properly without
betting the farm?
Well, also while not getting because these things are not getting left behind. So these things can't be 18-month waterfall projects while I take my time to build a data lake and connect everything and get all my cybersecurity in place and get the consulting firms in to work out all my business processes. And it's going to in 18 months, like it's too long, right? That traditional way of delivering an SAP project or whatever. So what do you suggest is the way to to strike that balance?
Yeah, look, what I see, the real what's the word? The early adopters, or the early adopter CTOs, what they've done is look at it like an investment portfolio, right? You're not going to dump everything into high risk tech stocks, right? You want a little bit of exposure to high risk tech stocks in the same way that you probably want to allocate a small single digit percentage to generative AI projects to see where it adds value, to test and validate some ideas, to prove some concepts to the business, get some runs on the board, build some early traction, build confidence in its application of use for your business, then go from there. It's actually really simple. Whatever your IT budget might be, I think carve out a little bit, discuss with the department heads to figure out what it might be that, obviously with a threshold level of understanding of what the technology is, but once that's achieved, and with that tinted lens, as I mentioned earlier, look at your business function and where it might add value. Right, the typical tasks are pretty easy to spot. Right, it's the things that you kind of don't like doing, the dull, the drudgerous, dangerous, perhaps not so much in the information worker context, but it's the things that should be really fast and really easy, but some reason or another, they're really slow and
That's
really
what that was my
difficult.
next question, Dave.
Yeah.
What are the the
Yeah.
main use cases that you're seeing, and as a practitioner out there, what's working, what's
Yeah.
not? Some real life
Yeah.
stuff if you're able to.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Look, a really, really common on-ramp at the moment is Gen AI in front of knowledge,
Yeah.
your knowledge portal, right? It's, I've said this before in other conversations, I'm sure of it, but I liken generative AI to the third wave of knowledge management, right? The first was really SharePoint, dump all information in, 3 weeks later, it's completely unusable. We've all seen that. The second wave was more collaborative tools where you have organizational knowledge that you work on together as a team. For example, Notion, Coda. Google has its own variant, as does M365. And now, the third wave is generative AI, where you can, with that corpus of organizational IP, you can create new, right? So that's a very, very common on-ramp for people. Very, very few organizations have issues with data. They just have issues with access, right, and timeliness and accuracy and traceability and all of that good stuff. But that's a very common use case. Interestingly, the flavor of the month, perhaps quarter, seems to be proposal writing. So we've got a whole host of different pilots out there for proposal writing, which isn't altogether a huge shock. We've got a wonderful partnership with a group based in Perth called BidWrite, who have spent 20, maybe 25 years writing bids, and they had that Kodak moment, as they say, recognizing that the technology might simply and quite crudely just put them out of business because their work is copywriting and writing compelling language to help organizations win work. So yeah, proposal writing, tender writing, bid writing, that's a big body of work for us right now.
Yeah.
There's no organization that's going to argue with, hey, help us win more work.
Yeah.
So that seems to be quite prevalent. Another is actually reporting and insights. And that's I guess also not a huge surprise. We work with a lot of our large organizations that have commissioned research, maybe academic sort of research, internal knowledge, troves and troves of it, structured data, unstructured data, and a request would come into their data or reporting or insights team, and there's 3 people involved, and 4 days later, here's the result, right? Whereas with a language model and with enough elbow grease, with enough data, you can build a language model that essentially can be queried for that type of knowledge. We're now starting to look at sort of social listening platforms. The name just escapes me right now, but there are social listening platforms that essentially track the health of your company's brand in the various social media outlets, and you can sort of bring that data in. So it's really limited only by your imagination, right? You've heard that before, and your availability to data, of course. Proposal writing is a big one. Knowledge management, knowledge access is also another big one. Reports, insight generation is another big one. We're starting now to also look at interfaces that are not text, because for some reason or another, we've all been trained that Gen AI equates to a text-based interface, which is frustrating because it's probably the worst UI for most use cases. We're starting to experiment with non-chat interfaces, perhaps more point and click and voice-based experiences. It just depends on the use case, depends on the end user.
Is that with Omni, the new the GPT Omni stuff is that what's enabling that?
Yeah. I mean, we chose to build exclusively on the Microsoft stack because there are 300 million users on the Microsoft 365 platform, right? So it was just an argument we didn't have to have and wanted to have. So we said, look, we'll stick with Microsoft until that's proven to to
good.
not
We're
required.
the same. So that's a good idea. 100%. Are there particular? Are you finding there's particular industries, organizational sizes, like where it's working, or is it you just seeing it across industry?
Oh, good question. No, we've got projects in every every conceivable industry,
Yeah.
from consulting, professional services, FMCG, consumer packaged goods, superannuation, the whole box and dice, really.
Right.
Where it does make most sense, though, especially in the work that we do, which is custom UI and custom models, where it makes most sense is in probably the upper end of small to mediums, where there's enough technology overhead, where there's enough sort of FTE, where there's enough labor behind it to sort of warrant some easy to measure productivity gains, if that makes sense. Yeah. Um,
Is that how
yeah.
you win the business cases? Are they kind of productivity gain type business cases? So
Mm.
do this and this now. This job now used to take 4 weeks, now takes 4 days. That kind of
Uh, yeah, great question. That again depends. That's the easy one to measure because every at some point in time the CFO will say, "Hey, what am I getting for this, right?
yes.
What's my ROI?" So yes, that's an easy one to measure. But I think in practice, we encourage our clients to look beyond productivity, right? Because yes, it's easy to measure hours work saved, but ultimately, if every single person, every single organization got access to these tools, there's no competitive advantage. Everyone just emails everyone else faster, right? And
Yeah.
then, so we encourage people to look beyond productivity. And what that means is once you've achieved that productivity unlock, what should be called into question is the work itself and how it's done,
Yes.
right? And that's harder to measure and harder to quantify, especially for a CFO, than hours saved, right? But I'll give you an example, right? It's a listed company where the gentleman runs, the gentleman that we work with, he runs the UK business. He was with the team in the UK, and they had a meeting, and we built a UI for the chat UI with proprietary data. They were running a team meeting, and his team asked him, "What do we know about this particular product line?" And on the spot, he actually didn't know, right? And then he realized, oh, hold on, I've got this tool that was built for us. So he typed the question in, all the facts were presented, and they all walked away with clear actions, right? Had it
Right.
not been for that tool, they would have walked away 2-3 weeks later. Oh,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
was going to follow up? Who took the action again? What was the,
Yeah. Yeah.
it just goes, goes into
Yeah.
to the machinery. Then, fast forward a little bit, what's happened is that the AI is invited to meetings, right? To listen and to partake in meetings, to summarize notes, to provide critique. And interestingly, we built this an AI assistant for the same team. Built an AI assistant that essentially hallucinates. And the purpose is the AI assistant hallucinates with facts and insights that's
Mm.
given to the AI assistant. And this AI assistant hallucinates because we want imaginative
Yeah.
and
Right.
creative ideas
Yeah.
that are actually not fact-based, right?
Yeah.
The inputs are the facts, but the ideas generated are actually quite imaginative. So,
But Dave, I don't know if you saw this article I saw in the AFR last week, and I don't know, I'm not sure whether to be excited or alarmed by it. Basically, it was they were talking about how the big four and KPMG particularly, their profits were
yep,
down 5 or 10% or whatever.
yep,
And I don't know, I think it was the head of consulting said, "Yeah, we budgeted for 125 digital FTEs this year, and we've already done 20." So, what do you mean by
nice,
digital FTE? That's where an AI bot replaces a human.
yeah,
That's pretty full on. That's intense. So,
yep,
like, what was alarming was that it was said, because not
yep,
everyone's been maybe a little bit afraid to talk about
yeah, yep,
it. But someone, as conservative as the big four that they're already doing it, and it's
yep,
happening. So,
yep,
I wasn't sure how to feel about it, but I think in a lot of ways, I think we all know that the job landscape's going to change. And
yep.
what do you think about where in a couple of years around role changes and what things will happen? I mean, I know there's been talk about types of jobs will change because which we can't foresee at the moment. I mean, yeah, I'm just keen, to hear what's your thought on all of that.
I guess we could look at it from a macro and micro view, right? I mean, if we zoom out a little bit, we humans have been trying to automate things for at least 300 years. So it's not new, right?
Yeah.
From the times we rolled out of caves to clashing rocks together to get heat a little bit faster to, generative AI creating copy for us. It's part of that one continuum, right? So that's the macro view. But if you look at it really closely, no one here can guarantee there's not going to be job loss, right? But if we look at it really closely, what is a role, right? What is a role? What's a role in an organization? It's a collection of tasks, right? And what's a collection of tasks? There's some inputs, there's some process, there's some outputs. And if it can be systematized, we
Both
should,
good.
right?
Yeah.
We should, so we can free up human labor. We can allocate that to digital labor. We can free up human labor to do things that are more meaningful, more strategic, or we could just do less. We can finish work early, right? That's also another alternative, right? There's a lot of articles, conversely, about burnout, right? Certain people in certain industries burdened by teachers, as an example, nurses, burdened by administrative tasks. Maybe generative AI should be pointed at that so they could leave work early and be more present or be more refreshed for their next shift, right? So I think there's a sort of pessimism versus optimism, right? And depending on what article and what day of the week it is, it sort of flip-flops between. But I take an optimist view, and I think that's the only view you can and should take, especially as an IT leader, because the tools themselves are just the tools.
That's right.
How you deploy them in an organization,
Yeah.
and the effect that you yield from that deployment is a matter of design.
It does feel inevitable, though. I mean, to use a word you said earlier, Dave, that sort of lower end, manual, guys who are doing highly manual tasks. I know that legal researcher, that customer service agent, data entry. Yeah, it feels inevitable to me. I mean, I'm not trying to be, overly capitalistic.
It's your point, Josh, that you can start. You should, you should be confident enough to start building your business cases around that proposition, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's unsavory in a way. I mean, part of me feels a little dirty, I suppose. I don't know, but it's so what and maybe a lot of IT leaders are feeling that. Maybe there is a reluctance to say, do we want to participate in people losing their jobs? Because in this case, IT, there is a responsibility. So.
To Dave's point, though, that's been going on for years, decades.
Obviously, automation's been around for RPA and all that's been around for a while. But I don't know, it just feels it's more in your face, a bit more prevalent. And we've all watched Terminator or whatever, but maybe we're over. I don't know, I'm just putting it out there because it's definitely it's in the zeitgeist, right? People are talking about it, thinking about it, worrying about it. What do you think? I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. I don't have an answer, so I'm just putting it out there.
I was speaking to a people and culture leader for a big Australian ASX listed entity, and I've actually spoken to many different people and culture leaders over the past 6 months, strangely, and the ones that have really cottoned on to generative AI's impact on the global workforce, even local workforce, has come to the conclusion they quickly need to get every single one of their employees, from the factory floor to the senior management and everything else in between, upskilled on what it is.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's Telstra is probably not a bad example of this, right? I think we were at the same event, and Dale Stevens from Telstra spoke about this exact point. And you could do the generic training, and then you need to quickly shift into specific training, because each role mandates and requires different things of generative AI, right? Someone that's on the phone versus someone that's maybe client-facing, an account manager or what have you. They have different needs and requirements from generative AI, but they still need something that looks and sounds like AI. So you can go generic and then specific based on role or department. But the other perspective I could add into the conversation is, there's a sort of VC bloke that that I've worked with in the past, and I guess his lens of the world is whether or not to deploy his funds capital into a startup, right? And so he's got that particular worldview, and his question, his line of inquiry to a lot of these new startups, software startups in particular, is knowing what you know today about the technology that's available, especially generative AI, how would you design your business operating model, right? I think that's a very, very powerful jolt, right? It's a very, very powerful jolt from people that are holding the purse strings to a couple $100 million. And you could apply that same line of inquiry to any new product, service, sort of offering that you're creating in the market, any new business line, new business. And I think that's
fascinating.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what people are looking at. They're like, well, we're going to compete with those startups in a few years' time, and those startups can have a much smaller, far more effective workforce than we've currently got. And that's the reality, right? So all fuzzy, warm feelings aside, the truth is to be competitive, you've got to stay pretty tight. You've got to get the most out of your people. And I think to your point, Dave, that's what AI is about. It's not about the productivity. It could be to help the CFO over the line, but it's about really getting more and more out of your people so you can scale faster.
There's another anecdote that I could share around a financial services mob out in Hong Kong. They're called Ant Financial. They're in a bit of hot water for other reasons, but basically Ant Financial have this industrialized AI core. So they're AI first, right? Every product, service, every customer interaction, is AI first, right?
Yeah, right.
They have a workforce of, I believe, 10,000, and they service 1.5 billion customers. So the ratio is 1 to 150,000, which is pretty wild. Then you look at Commonwealth Bank. This is not about bank bashing, right? This is just and it's not
enough. Let's bash away.
But Commonwealth Bank have 16,000 employees. Don't quote me, but let's say 16,000. They service about 10 million customers. So I don't know the mental math there, but the ratio is quite different, right?
Yeah.
It's not a fair comparison because of the legacy sort of business and all of that. But it's just to illustrate and to bring to life what is actually possible when you take an AI first to organizational and operating model design, right?
I like that. I was going to say, I like that AI first concept. So
it's like cloud first.
Digital first, mobile first, AI first is a really interesting lens to apply to product design, any sort of product design. Just thinking about how do we make this AI first? I actually hadn't thought about that.
You can achieve it on a very personal, individual level as well, right? Before I start any task, or it be some event or organizing some event or creating a proposal or structuring a strategy document or whatever the case may be, I'll literally just blurt it out into a private instance of an AI model and get some initial pointers, and that just truncates the process, right? And it's a bit sort of drink from this poison chalice in the sense that I recognize that I'm not exercising whatever part of the brain is in use for critical thinking. Like, I totally get that, but I can do more in the same amount of time, and that's very, very appealing to me because I just want to finish work a little bit earlier, right? To put it simply.
For sure. But it's also it exercises a different part of your brain that you probably hadn't exercised before as well. So I think you've got a choice. So do you fight it, resist it, or do you embrace it? Right?
I think we have to. We've got to embrace it. We can't. I don't think we've got to. Dave, we're fascinating. We've got to get you back. We could talk for another hour or two, Tom, but we're ready on time. Dave, any final points or anything? How can people, if people want to chat to you, how do people want to reach out? What do you suggest?
Find me on LinkedIn, Dave Phung. We can chuck an email in the show notes if you like, but I'm always happy to chat about tech. I love disruption. I love disruption for its ability to just supercharge organizations into new and exciting levels of performance. And I think it's great. And I've seen it for the past 20 years. It's wonderful when you can take a small piece of emerging tech, plug it into an organization and achieve essentially what is disproportionate results, right? Hopefully the disproportionate results in a positive way. That's me. Thank you for having me. It's been a wonderful to chat.
No, thank you. Really, really appreciate it. Tom, as always.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a lot to think about in this one, that AI first piece, but I think it really speaks to the AI strategy that many of our listeners are starting to get their heads around and actually driving, to your point, Dave, about IT leaders being in the middle of this massive change, and what a
Yeah.
great time to be an IT leader, right?
Yeah.
So it's great to have you.
Yeah.
On. Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah. I think that
Thanks.
the other strategy is worth just unpicking for a little bit, right? This is what I find really fascinating. We were asked to create a strategy piece for a member services organization who shall remain unnamed. And I basically said to him, look, we can spend 8 weeks doing this, but the second it's deployed, it's out of date. Right? It's a waste of money, mate. It's a complete waste of your money. You're better off allocating half of that budget to trialing a few ideas. You're much better off at that, and then you can point to it. You can wave it around in front of your board, your CEO, and say, "Hey, look, there it is. Proof's in the pudding, right?"
Yeah.
I'll stop there.
Fantastic. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, everyone, and Tom, as always. Thank you all for listening to the Leading IT podcast. As Dave mentioned, you can find him on LinkedIn, and if you want to reach out to me, Rubens at imperiumit.com.au. Thanks again. We'll see you all soon.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.